What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the garage. Today's gonna be pretty exciting. We're gonna be doing some work on the Mark V here. We have the integrated engineering intake manifold for going stage 2. Stick around. Hey guys, got a new merch store available with some hats, shirts, and other accessories. So if you want to pick up some cool swag and support the channel, go ahead and click that link in the description below. Alright, we're putting the intake manifold on today. We're going stage 2. Integrated engineering. So this is the intake manifold. This is the raw version. I didn't go for the black powder coated. I kind of have a theme in mind for the future of the car. So stay tuned for that. Hit that subscribe button. Stick around for a while. But you get all the accessories you need in the bag, and Integrated usually throws in a little goodie bag for you. A little koozie, some decals. You get some other decals and stuff in this bag too. Why don't you hang out with me? We're gonna go through kind of a step-by-step process of getting this in there, something a little better than just following a manual online. Hopefully it'll be helpful for you and help you do your stage 2 intake manifold from Integrated Engineering. Well, first things first, we got to get the intake out of the way. I have the aftermarket short ram from Engine on here, so this is going to be a lot easier for me. If you still have the factory intake up top here, you're going to have to take off all the bolts and then remove all the clamps that are holding it to the throttle body. So go ahead and get all that out of the way, and then we'll move on. All that out of the way, we got to get the camshaft sensor and then the purge valve out of the way. So you're going to start here. This is your cam position sensor. You got to disconnect this one for the purge valve, and then we'll actually disconnect the hoses at this section here and take this whole section of hose off. So a little flat blade, kind of push in on the sensor and then go up with the flat blade, and then it should release and come out. Got both those off there, and then we're gonna have to release this clamp here, and there should be a clamp here, and then you can take the whole section out at once. Don't want to split the hose, but sometimes you can get behind it and motivate it. Now with that off, you can just pop it out of these little clamps here and get it off that riser tab, and then just set this off to the side. Then we have to get this engine lifting bracket out of the way. So there's 2 bolts here. We got to take both those out. It is a 10 triple square, so just get an extension and you can go in from underneath right here. Break them loose, and then you can get both the bolts out. After you get those bolts out, you got to disconnect all your fuel injectors. In this case, 5-cylinder, 5 injectors. You're gonna have to pull the tab on the back side, the part facing the head. So sometimes it's always easier on the connectors. Usually, if you just put a little down force on it, grab the connector, the clip, and then pull up. So go ahead and disconnect all 5 of those. Those all disconnected, you can kind of work this bracket out of the way. There's just a couple tabs on the bottom here that hold the wiring harness in. You can just work those out of the bracket. Just kind of lay the harness so it's out of the way, and then you can actually get the whole engine lift assembly out. All right, with the wiring harness out of the way, I just swung it up to the side here. There's 2 bolts here and here that hold the fuel rail down. That's a T20 in my case. I think their manual says a T25, so check yours. It might be a T25 or a T20, but it's a T20 in my case, so you can go ahead and remove those, and then we will be able to kind of just wiggle this with gentle force pulling outwards and be able to pull all the injectors out with the rail and set it aside. Having a magnet handy comes in handy. You can see how you can wiggle it now. So just be able to wiggle it and kind of come up with it. There we go. Kind of just work those over to the passenger side of the vehicle. Just set them out of the way so they're not in your way. And then you can see you got all the access there. What you're going to want to do at this point is, you see all the debris in there, you definitely want to get a vacuum out or something and clean all that up. That way when we remove the manifold, we're not dropping anything into the cylinders. There's already some dust going down the holes there. But definitely get a vacuum out, get all that debris there. That way you're not adding any debris into the engine. Okay, so back over on the driver's side near the throttle body, this is probably going to be hard to see on the camera, but you've got your throttle body connection right there, and then you've got your map sensor connector there. You need to get both those connectors off just by, again, gently pulling the tab outwards and then sliding the connector off. And then this guy here, this whole harness, has a little clip that goes on the intake manifold. You can just pull up on that clip and that'll allow you to kind of move the harness out of the way to get access. This map one's going to be a little tricky just because of where it's located. Ta-da! There is a ring holding the dipstick on, the tube on. You're going to want to, I don't have a good way to get the camera in there. Just use a flat blade screwdriver, kind of push down on the ring, and then that should release the dipstick from the intake manifold. And then after you get that kind of released and pulled back, don't pull the dipstick out, leave it there. Just want to release it from the manifold. You've got all these bolts going around the manifold here. That is a 6mm hex drive, so you're going to need to take those out. And then additionally, down here on the right, your engine may have a vacuum line attached to it, so you'll have to pull that vacuum line off. This particular model, this is a 2010, it is capped off right there, so I don't need to pull that line off. But if you do have a line attached there, you'll have to pull that vacuum line off. So we're going to go around, we're going to get all these bolts out, and then this is pretty close to pulling away from the engine. Alright, now that we got all those bolts out and Volkswagen's annoying single bolt there, we're going to have to disconnect this hose. Now they're going to tell you to do it up here by the breather, but I've got the spool and vacuum pump delete kit on this, so this is kind of all tied into the one that goes to the brake booster. So what I'm going to do is just disconnect it down here and then get the hose off, and then we should be able to pull the manifold away from the vehicle. Alright, we should be able to remove the manifold. Just make sure you're not pulling on your dipstick here. You don't want to pull that out of the block. Lose a bunch of oil down there. So with that kind of rocked out of the way, there she is. Stock manifold out. Old intake's out. You're going to want to make sure you clean up this surface really well. You can see a little bit of oil dripping there, and then you also want to make sure that none of the green gaskets are stuck to the cylinder head. If they are, pull them off now, and then just make sure you clean up this surface really good. Then we can go over to the intakes and we can swap all the throttle body and everything over to the new intake and get the new intake manifold prepped for install. So next step is to prep the new manifold with the old stuff. So we got to pull the throttle body and the map sensor off. This is a T20 Torx and these are T30 Torx. And I'm going to have to take this extra collar off and this little silicone tube off. That's for the intake, so I can have access to the bolts. But so you're going to get all that off, pull the throttle body off, pull the map sensor off. Alright, Alright, so the first step of prep on the new intake manifold is this is flipped upside down. You got all these bungs here. This is going to be where you're going to do all your vacuum fittings. So you need to find the fittings that are going to work for the hoses you have to attach. Every vehicle is going to be slightly different. They only give you 3 fittings for the small ones as caps, as plugs, and then 1 for the big one. You're going to want to use a little bit of Teflon tape as thread sealer when you're putting these in, and then the small ones are a 3/16 Allen head, and the big plugs are a 1/4 inch Allen head. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all plugged up, and then it'll be ready to mount like the throttle body, the dipstick clamp, and then the map sensor. So the next step is to get 4 of these 12mm length bolts and your map sensor and your dipstick tube bracket. We're going to mount these. That's going to go there, and map sensor there. We are going to use a drop of blue thread lock just because we're going metal bolt into metal. And then you want the flange of this bracket here. You want it on the side where all your connectors are there, all your plugs and whatnot for your vacuum lines. So I'm going to go ahead and get those bolted up. You will want to do a visual inspection on the O-ring on your map sensor here just to make sure there's no physical damage to it. This one, just cleaned it up, looks really good. So we're just going to put that back in, and the sensor is going to face outwards towards the throttle body. And the last step of the prep for the intake manifold is to flip it over here. You're going to have your 5 runners. You've got your 5 supplied gaskets. Sorry, out of frame. 5 runners, 5 gaskets. You're going to want to seat them into the grooves here. And then just be careful not to, cut them or cause any damage. So just kind of roll them in there. They should fit almost perfect. Right, with all those in, if you're not installing the integrated engineering intake, then you can go ahead and skip ahead in their manual anyway, because their intake is a little bit more involved for install than a standard short ram or cold air intake. So since I got that engine short ram, we are going to skip ahead. So this is the point where we're going to put the new manifold into the engine bay and mount it back up to the head. First thing you're going to want to do is just make a visual inspection, make sure nothing, while you were out there doing the other stuff, make sure nothing fell into your valves. You definitely don't want to run anything through there. So just give a visual inspection, make sure nothing fell down there. Make sure everything's clean, like we already did. And then you've got 8 bolts that are 25mm in length, and then 1 bolt that's shorter, that's 20mm in length. That's actually your lower bolt here below cylinder 3. So you're going to want to use a little bit of thread lock on these bolts. Again, we're going metal into metal. You're going to want to start all the top ones just loose, and then when we go to tighten them, we're going to tighten the bottom one first. And when you start to tighten them up, be careful not to move the manifold around too much. So you don't want to knock those gaskets out. So you want the gaskets to sit flush here and not be knocked out of the groove on the manifold. So just get it in there, start the top bolts, and then we'll do the bottom bolt. It's going to be a little tricky to get to, just because it's right below the runner. Engineering at its finest, but it's right below the runner, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get through. It's the same with that one that you had to get the long tube through the manifold runner on the stock manifold to get it out. But yeah, just start with the top ones, and then when we go to tighten it down, we're going to tighten the bottom one first. Alright, so things they don't tell you, this bracket here, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that. Basically it's holding one of your coolant lines that's going up to the reservoir. The top part of the bracket here is causing interference on the manifold, so I don't want to take that off because I want it to support the hose. So I'm going to try to just bend it forward. That way it gets it out of the way and gets it clearanced, and then we should be able to drop it in there and line the bolts up. So once you get the first one started, a little tricky lining it up, but once you get the first one started, it'll kind of support it there, and you can go through, thread lock them, hand tighten them just loosely. You don't even need to hand tighten them, just make them loose, and then we can start the lower bolts. Alright, so first real and only hiccup in the install is I just realized after loosely putting the manifold in here that this runner coming off of the PCV valve now has nowhere to go, and since I'm not running the integrated engineering intake, that problem is not going to be solved. So I'm either going to have to adapt that down and go into the fitting on the bottom side of this guy that I capped off, just use some adapters to go down to the smaller line, or I do have that extra port on the front of my engine intake that I have capped off because my vehicle didn't have the piping that went to it, so I could either get a fitting, a coupler, and come back with more hose up to the front side there. I really don't want to do that. I'd rather just leave the intake the way it is and then adapt it down to that. So I'm gonna have to go get some parts, and I'm gonna have to take this back off, which might be good because I don't know if I can get to that bolt without dropping it on the underside of runner 3, so I might have to start with that one, and then do all the other bolts. So anyways, a little delay in the system, but parts running, we'll be back. Alright, well, I found a solution to our problem here. Not the prettiest thing, but Granger of all places had this reducer for me with these 2 barbs that's going to reduce this thicker 1-inch pipe coming off the PCV valve down to 1/4 inch that I can run with the supplied tubing to the new intake manifold. So that capped portion I had underneath the new manifold, I just took the cap off, put the included tubing on there, and then when we get the manifold in, I'll just cut it to length and hook it up here, and everything should be hooked up and good to go. Alright, with everything situated now, we're going to put the intake manifold back in. I think I'm just going to start with the top bolts again, get them loosely in there. There's really no good way to get to that bottom bolt there. It's right under runner 3, so it's just no easy way to do it. I'm going to leave that for last. I'm going to loosely put the top ones in, and then we'll start by trying to get that one in and then tightening that one down first, and then we'll torque all the other ones down. Well, after some fishing around in there with both my hands like this, I got the bolt pushed in to its final position. Now I got to figure out how the hell I'm going to get a wrench down there and tighten it down. But that was kind of a pain. I have a paper towel or a shop towel just kind of laid over the engine there. That way if I did drop it, it just fell on the towel instead of falling into all the nooks and crannies of the block. And then I had my magnet handy, kind of fed it down and just felt around with your fingers. It's in there, so now we just got to tighten them all down and then torque them down. The torque spec is 7 foot-pounds. Doesn't sound like much, but that's all it takes. So I am going to do my best to figure out how to get this started. Feels like the threads are started now. I just got to figure out how I'm going to get down in there. I don't think I'm going to be able to torque this one down, but we'll just snug it up and give it a nice little tighten with the old hand, if I can get my wrench in there and not break my arm trying to do it. Yeah, it makes you wonder how they do this without pulling the whole front end off the car. I'm sure that's what they do. They put it on the lift at the shop, they pull the front end off, they make it real easy for you. But it's literally right under this runner. Well, it's started, so I'm going to torque down the top and then try to get down there and feed that bottom one in. Alright, we got all these torqued down with the 2 bottom ones here and the 3rd bottom one there. The 4th bottom one is the one I gotta try to work in. I'm probably gonna do it off camera just because I need the room to work on it. Alright, that bottom bolt is in. So I actually was starting with this 5mm Allen here. I'm trying to work it, but it's being so long you can only get so much of a swing out of it. I ended up finding a short one in there. You can see how much shorter it is. You get a lot more throw when you figure it out in there, when you know, find the hex and get it inserted, because you're trying to get it in one of these hexes, but you're fishing blind, so you're just doing it by feel. So that made it a lot easier. So get yourself a short 5mm Allen. Cut one up if you have to. Yeah, doing that. I kept the towel there. I did drop this a couple times. That towel below helped catch it instead of it falling in the cracks of the engine block. So definitely that, and then maybe if you had a small mirror or something, it might help you a little bit visually, but I was just kind of fishing around with both hands. Got it tight, got the job done. Not the easiest thing in the world to do, but now we can move on. Next up, we're going to secure the dipstick tube here. They've got this clamp here. So you're just going to put that around the dipstick and then use a 10mm bolt and clamp it to that bracket that we mounted on the bottom side of the intake manifold. And again, I'm going to use a little bit of thread lock just so it doesn't back out and we don't have any problems. Time to hook up that little contraption we made. Gonna hook up the vacuum fittings. So on your specific vehicle, you're gonna want to hook up all the vacuum fittings that you had disconnected, just run them back to the original locations, and then hook them up under here with all the fittings that you had pre-installed on the bottom side of the intake manifold. Well, it's in. I'm gonna figure out once the throttle body and everything's on if I got a good place to strap it to or something, because she's just rattling around in there. So we'll come up with a good final solution once the rest of the install is done. Maybe strap it up to something so it's kind of supported a little bit and not just hanging there. Maybe up to that retainer there for the fuel rail. We'll figure it out. Time to put the fuel rail back on. So these injector seals here, you're definitely going to want to put a little bit of grease or like some spray silicone just to help seat them into the intake manifold. And then you've got the 2 remaining 12mm bolts that are going to go here and here to secure it to the manifold. Alright, there we are. Just firm pressure straight down. You don't want to push it at an angle or anything. Just kind of rock it a little bit if you need to. But they all slid in and kind of popped in, and then just tighten those 2 bolts down. So with all the fuel injectors and everything in, we got to get them connected somehow. We got to take this factory mounting tray off. So there's some tape just looping it to the tray. You want to take a razor knife, cut the appropriate tape, and then take that tray off, and then we're going to lay it right underneath and feed the wires, the connectors back up under the fuel rail. And then we can also put the purge valve back in, and then we can connect the cam position sensor, the purge valve, and all the fuel injectors. Well, with all that other stuff done, the intake manifold is officially on the car. All we got to do is put the throttle body back in. They give you another supplied O-ring, the bigger of the 6 that you got. You already used the 5. You're just going to want to seat that in the groove here. Again, making sure it's fully seated and not coming out. And then use the 5 long bolts that aren't fully threaded to secure the throttle body. And then we'll go ahead and hook up the intake. If you were using the integrated engineering intake, say you did the power bundle, and you got the intake and the manifold, that intake would already be installed. We skipped that process on this install in particular because I'm using the engine short ram that I already had. So that being said, we'll get the throttle body on, I'll hook my intake back up, and then we will fire this thing up and make sure she runs and we don't have any fuel leaks or vacuum leaks. Alright, with the throttle body mounted up, you can go ahead and reconnect your purge valve and then both your map sensor and your throttle body connector. This does put a little bit more stress on the purge valve line here. If you have to, you can take it out of this clip here. That would give you a little bit more room on it. It's not stretched too bad right here, but this manifold does slightly shift the position of the throttle body. Looks like more outwards this way from the stock manifold. So also depending on your intake that you're using, you might run into some clearance issues. Hopefully I'm going to be fine here with the short ram intake. It should just move the cone filter out, but there still should be plenty of room. If anything, it's going to hit the headlight here. If you are using a cold air intake, being that those tubes are pre-bent and they kind of go into the fender there, that might cause some issues with this manifold. So I mean, realistically, your best bet is to go with Integrated Engineering's intake as well as their manifold. Obviously those were engineered together, so they're going to be the best fit, and it also would take care of this situation here that I ran into. And then since I did the vacuum pump delete, I would just run that directly to the manifold. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and button up the intake and then we can see if she fires up. So that engine intake does not fit. It was basically just pushing it way over into the corner over here. So what I did is I actually just put the filter right on the throttle body. I know, don't judge me. And then the only thing that couldn't get attached is this little guy here. That's actually the oil filter breather hose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up a little filter to put on there. That'll still allow it to breathe but not be, you know, wide open like this. So realistically, everything is done. Time to start it up. Alright, that's a wrap on the Integrated Engineering intake manifold for the Volkswagen 2.5 liter 5-cylinder. Hope this video helped you guys out. Hope it answered any questions you had. If you still have any, leave them down in the comments below. I will say that I think your best bet for doing this upgrade going stage 2 on your 5-cylinder is to probably just do their power bundle with their intake, their manifold, and then the tune. I honestly was just being cheap, and I just wanted the manifold, and then I wanted to pay the upgrade pricing on the tune since I'm already stage 1. But I think your best bet, ease of install, everything working properly and fitment wise and everything, is just to be buy their power bundle. Get everything all in one bundle, and then you're good to go. From the talks I had with them prior to doing this, they couldn't break up the kit and sell me just the intake, so the only way to get their intake is to buy the power stage bundle and get everything. So I'd say it's probably worth the money to just do that, but next step is to get the stage 2 tune flashed over to the ECU and then go take her for a drive. So I'm going to wrap this video here. Hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for the next videos where I show you how to do use their software and flash the tune onto your ECU, and then we'll take it for a drive in a video after that and get my initial reaction on going stage 2. Thanks for watching.